Hello everyone, and welcome to another short video on research methods. In this short video, I'm going to talk about qualitative methods more broadly, and then focusing on case study research. So my goal in this video is fourfold. Number one, I would like to highlight some distinctions between the quantitative and qualitative approaches to research, and then introduce qualitative methods and data sources, and then briefly explain case study as a predominant qualitative method, and finally, I will introduce two sample case studies that by reading them and analyzing them, you hopefully get a better understanding of how case studies are designed and conducted and reported. Some highlights of the distinctions between qualitative and quantitative method, as you can see here, and as I clarified in my previous videos, that quantitative research is generally said to be deductive in nature. Meaning that they start with a theory to be tested through hypothesis, checking hypothesis related to that theory. And the purpose of conducting quantitative research is to make generalizations, sometimes resulting in universal laws that could be used in different contexts. And this is usually done through a statistical analysis of the data. And mostly the assumption is that the reality, the phenomenon, the object of a study is out there, and the researcher therefore can discover it, investigate it, and then report it. And therefore it is said that quantitative research reports explanation of the phenomenon from the perspective of the researcher, and therefore the term ethic view is used to describe this approach to research. On the other hand, what we understand is that qualitative method is inductive in nature, meaning that rather than starting with a theoretical framework, it starts with data. And the purpose is to generate hypotheses. In a fully fledged type of qualitative method like grounded theory, researchers might even be able to produce a theory that could later on be tested by quantitative researchers through the process that they go through. The purpose of qualitative methods as compared to quantitative methods is to gain deeper understanding and local meanings rather than seeking universal laws and generalizations. And this is usually done through thematic analysis of the qualitative data. And mostly, researchers' explanations are the perspective of the participants, and therefore the phenomenon under the study is explained from the perspective of participants, and therefore the term emic view is used to describe this approach to research. So graphically, we can show that this is the process that qualitative researchers go through in order to come to an understanding and an explanation about the research phenomenon. So they start with the data, qualitative data, and then they try to organize and manage their data, usually nowadays through software programs like NVivo or Atlas or Maxtoda and other types of qualitative software programs. And then they do data analysis through coding and developing categories from the codes, and finally come across some themes or patterns that could be used in order to explain the phenomenon. As it can be seen in this graph, there is a link between data analysis and data collection phase or qualitative data. And that means that usually in qualitative research there is a recursive process in that data is collected and analyzed, and then researchers find some gaps in forming the patterns, and therefore they go for collecting further qualitative data and analyzing it. So one of the distinctive features between quantitative and qualitative methods is ethic versus emic perspectives. As I mentioned, usually it is said that in quantitative research, researchers try to investigate and discover the phenomenon and explain the phenomenon from their own perspective. Whereas in qualitative research, researchers are open to participants' views and perspectives, and therefore they use an emic perspective in order to understand and explain the phenomenon. The emic perspective focuses on participants' meaning and subjective understanding of their behaviors, because it is believed that any reality is subjectively constructed, and therefore, as researchers, we need to find that subjective construction of the reality. And therefore, qualitative researchers usually spend a long time in order to immerse themselves in the culture in which they are going to collect and analyze data. And this is usually referred to as prolonged engagement with the research site, and this is used as one of the indices of credibility of the findings in qualitative research. And this prolonged engagement with the research site and the participants will help researchers to understand the culture as perceived as the participants. Some of the major qualitative methods that could be found in research methods textbooks and in the literature on research methodology are ethnography, case study, discourse analysis and critical discourse analysis, narrative inquiry, grounded theory, conversation analysis, and multimodal analysis and multimodal discourse analysis. Depending on the researcher's orientation and the purpose and research questions, any of these qualitative research methods could be used in order to collect and analyze data and provide an explanation about the object of the study. So case study is one of the qualitative methods that is used in order to investigate a case. I have borrowed this definition of case study from Coville Dictionary, and as you can see, it defines case study as an account that gives detailed information about a person, a group, a thing, and their development over a period of time. So again, depending on the purpose of the case study and the research questions, the case could be one person, it could be a group of people, or it could be something that the researcher might be interested in studying and investigating. So those who are interested to do case study, they look for in-depth study and investigation of a single case in their particular context. One of the main features of qualitative research is that the phenomenon and the object of the study and the cases are studied in their context, and therefore different features of context are investigated and reported, and how they might affect on the case and its development. And they do this in order to understand the complexities involved in the behaviors as well as the cultures as well as the understandings. So rather than seeking generalization, as it's usually the case in quantitative methods, in qualitative methods more broadly and in case study in particular, researchers look for what makes a case peculiar. And this case might be a single person, an ethnic group, or an organization. It might be interesting to mention at this point that in quantitative research, peculiar cases are usually left out from the analysis because they are considered as outliers. Whereas in qualitative research, the focus is on these peculiar cases and how they understand the world and around them, as well as why they do behave in a particular way that they do. One of the important concepts in qualitative research, again more broadly, but also in case study, is the concept of triangulation. And it's important to strive for understanding from different, angles and perspectives, and therefore triangulation is an important concept and way to strive for rigor in case study and also in other qualitative, methods. And this is usually done through collecting data from different sources. And when inferences and conclusions from different sources merge with each other and corroborate and support each other, then the researcher can claim for rigor and triangulation in the research findings. So, what are some of the different data sources that qualitative researchers rely on in order to collect, analyze, and then report their findings? These are some of the examples, observations. For example, qualitative research might be studying a particular classroom, and therefore he or she might take the role of a participant or non-participant observer in observing the class. He or she can take notes, which is usually referred to as field notes, and he or she can conduct interviews with the cases, which might include teachers, students, administrators, and other people involved in the research phenomenon. Sometimes qualitative researchers collect verbal protocols. These are think aloud protocols that again could be introspective, concurrent, as participants are involved in a task. They can also think aloud of the processes that they go through, or it could be retrospective and therefore taking the form of post-task interviews. The other data source could be self-reports or logs and diaries kept by the participants and explaining the processes that they go through or the thinkings that they develop. Sometimes qualitative researchers video tape the research site, or they might picture and take photographs of the research site. The other important data sources in qualitative research are narratives and life stories or life histories by the participants. When qualitative research is related to real-time interaction, again, audio and video recording of real-time interactions between participants is a major data source that could be used in qualitative research. So here I introduce a case study conducted by Evolem and published in 2000. The title of the paper is Second Language Literacy and the Design of the Self, a case study of a teenager writing on the internet. This case study was published in TESOL Quarterly, Volume 34, Issue 3, that you can find, and then by reading it carefully and answering these questions, you should be able to understand how a case study could be designed, implemented, and then reported. Another example of a case study which is more recent is one conducted by Zhang. The title of the paper is Understanding Chinese Learners' Willingness to Communicate in a New Zealand ESL Classroom, a multiple case study drawing on the theory of planned behavior. And this study is published in the journal System, Volume 41. Again, you should be able to find this article and use the same questions as I introduced before, and answer these questions in light of the materials presented in the article, and therefore getting more familiar of how case studies might be designed and then implemented in terms of data collection and analysis and reported as a research report and article. I hope you have got a grasp of qualitative research in general and case study in particular, and talk to you later with more videos.